Good afternoon. This is week 6 of Social Work 636, and the emphasis this week is on funding of social services. So week 6 examines the problem of funding social services and the relationship between unmet needs and programs. Content includes an examination of funding alternatives and the strengths and limitations of each alternative, information on grant sources, including foundations and government, and selection of appropriate funding alternatives. The class also examines the concept of unmet need and how to assess need for the purposes of funding development. The objectives for this week are as follows: to describe alternate sources of funding the social services, to describe the sources of grant funding, and also to describe the concept of unmet needs. The learning activities for this week are as follows. There are 4 chapters from the Brody and Nair text. The chapters are Chapter 13, Managing Agency Finances, Chapter 14, Strategic Resource Development, Chapter 15, Preparing Effective Proposals, and Chapter 16, Seeking Funding. There are 2 outside readings. The media, we will go over the slides for this week. There are 2 videos. One is called Learn Fundraising Basics in 12 Minutes. The other is also around basic fundraising tips from a former NFL pro football player. And they give very good ideas in a very short time about how to raise funds. So please take a look at those videos for this week. This week, the focus is on writing a paper. We went over the parameters of that assessment paper last week, so I will say to you, refer to the directions for that paper and go over the requirements for that paper. It is not to be a question and answer. It is a narrative paper that answers all the headings that are outlined in this assessment. So please go back and read the requirements of this paper. Remember that it is a narrative paper, not a question and answer. And you can use headings or subheadings, but just don't make it a question and answer. Use references for support because this is an academic paper. So now let's go to talking about the slides for this week. The media slides for this week are around funding the social services and the needs assessment. And I will also be going over a PowerPoint that describes at least 2 of the chapters around funding in particular. This slide focuses a lot on the needs assessment. So methods of funding. Funding in general exists on a continuum from the client to the society in general. So some clients self-pay for their services, fee for services, without subsidies such as sliding scale, where the agency subsidizes the cost. Charity means that clients are paying in full for their services, which may come from donors or fundraisers. Third-party payment like insurance, or competitive grants that allow us to provide services based on specific funding from a foundation or some other grantor. And then service contracts. Policies set funding, services, and only choice is who provides the service. Again, this is a chart that talks about the methods of funding consideration. So in terms of comparison of competitive grants to contracts, do not confuse funding through service contracts with funding through competitive grants. Service contracts are when the government policy mandates and funds a service and then selects an agency to implement that service. There is no choice for the agency about the service, only which agency gets the funds is typically negotiable. And then there are competitive grants. When a government or private funder has a priority for service, but leaves all major decisions to the agency selected based on a competitive comparison of agencies' submission. What is that competitive grant process? Funders recognize several issues about social programs that demand flexible funding solutions. These include many problems do not have a perfect solution. There are different causes, client populations, different effective interventions, and in some cases, no certain effective intervention. Many of the agencies that address social problems have capacity needs, including funding, staff training, more equipment, more space, etc. And some social problems are new and unknown. So to address these issues, the funders, be it government or foundations, they have flexibility and they offer competitive grants. There are several types of grants, including capacity building, which helps improve an agency's service or staff, research to help study a problem or evaluate a service, endowment support to help build long-term sustainability, planning grants to help plan projects, demonstration grants to fund projects expected to be effective and or to try something new, and implementation or service grants. The process. The government passes a law related to a social problem and includes some funds under this law for competitive grant responses. The responsibility for selecting the recipient is given to that government agency or a foundation at an annual meeting, selects the priority, it assigns the selection of recipients to staff at the foundation. So grants, external funding sources. So grants may be based in government policy or a foundation priority. If it is government, it's often more prestigious, larger amounts, and long-term, but usually more difficult, more competitive, and inconsistent. The foundation, there are many, many sources, a large variety of issues, but sifting and choosing may be difficult. There are many, many types of foundations. They include family foundations, corporate foundations, community foundations, general purpose foundations like the United Way, and advocacy foundations like the Annie E. Casey or AARP. Finding the source. These organizations, be it government or foundation, will put out what's called an RFP. Request for proposal is usually some of the terms used, FOA, funding opportunity announcement, or an NOFA, notice of funding availability. And then there are super NOFAs used when agencies sometimes collapse them into a single funding scheme. How can you find such funding? What are the steps? Well, first, you develop a clear project or research question and methodology. In other words, determine your need. Think about the type of grant that fits your need. Search for an RFP that best fits your project. Write the proposal and exactly in the format the funder desires. Submit proposal according to the funder's instructions and then hope. How do you determine whether an RFP is appropriate for you? Well, first you read it. So it has to be read to see if it fits your organization's needs and or your organization fits the requirements of the RFP. The important thing to remember, not all RFPs fund all projects. The funders are looking for specifics. So what's in a request for a proposal? The name of the program of funding, the name of the organization providing the funding, what will be funded, what types of organizations are eligible. For example, can only 501c3 organizations apply? What the problem area is that they are looking to fund, the client characteristics, the geographical location that they're willing to fund, and types of interventions. The RFPs will tell you what they won't fund. For example, they may not fund overhead or administration or travel. They may not fund capital campaign projects or construction. And then how much you will receive and over what time frame. So the RFP includes due dates of application, contact information, where you get the forms if necessary, and who might be willing to help you with that proposal. So you can go online and search for foundation and government grants that might meet your organization. Each potential funder has its web page. So that's one way you might find grant sources. There are a lot of books. You can go to a library. There are a lot of resources about what grants are available based on state, based on federal, and you can take a look and see if you might be able to apply word of mouth, talking to other organizations. Looking at grants based on the annual reports of organizations can tell you, based on a similar organization, what grants and proposals they've been successful in putting out there and getting funding for. So these are some of the basic elements of your proposal. It's going to include a title or cover page, introduction or summary, a statement of need, goals and objectives, procedures, budget and budget narrative, evaluation plan, letters of support, and any other appendices that are required for the grant. So the needs assessment. What is the statement of need? It is the first substantive part of the proposal. It's where you make the argument that there is a demonstrated need for your program service. The need is a priority among all the various issues. Yours is important enough to fund. Critically important because it contains indicators of need that serve as the targets for change, i.e. providing statistics showing the problem as it exists at the beginning of the project. One of two sections in the grant where empirical literature is expected. It's expected that you will have done a good literature review and be able to provide documentation on the need for the service that you are asking for. Where does it fit in the proposal? Again, this gives you an outline about how most proposals are requested to be organized. So your statement of need comes after your clear introduction. So what goes into that statement? A definition of the problem, evidence of the size of the problem, and again, as much quantifiable information and or qualitative information you can provide, but you got to give statistics. So you want to include, again, statistics. You want to do a literature search so that that's part, again, funders want to know that you know what you're talking about. So what goes into a statement of need? Again, here are some possibilities. What's the unmet need, the condition, problem? What does your organization want to change? This is your outcomes. Who will be served? How will they benefit? What is the source of this problem? So something about the history. What are its causes? Again, theoretical framework. What are the characteristics of those who are impacted and how widely is this recognized? So what goes into a statement of need continued? A model to include would be an organizational context. What makes your organization the best choice to deal with this issue? The statement of need describes what the problem issue is that the grant wants to address. And this is a reference to the Foundation Center that includes the following as critical aspects. So let's go back and look at some of these. The statement of need will enable a reader to learn more about the issues. It presents the facts and evidence that support the need for the project and establishes that your nonprofit understands the problems and therefore can reasonably address them. You want this section to be succinct but persuasive. So you have to decide what to include because you don't want it to be longer than what the grant parameters require, but you want that information to be important and as current information as you can provide, the best. Second, give the reader hope that actually, given all the statistics you give them, that if they give you this money, you could probably help solve this problem. So is your program going to be a specific model to solve the problem? Fourth, determine whether it is reasonable to portray the need as acute or chronic. Fifth, decide whether you can demonstrate that your program addresses the need differently or better than other projects that preceded it. Sixth, avoid circular reasoning. In circular reasoning, you present the absence of your solution as the actual problem. Then your solution is offered as the way to solve the problem. For example, the circular reasoning for building a community swimming pool might go like this. The problem is that we have no pool in our community. Building a pool will solve the problem. It's more persuasive to say that what a pool has meant to a neighboring community, permitting it to do so many things like recreation, exercise, and physical therapy programs, and that this might, in fact, help your community in the same way. Now let's move to looking at the PowerPoint that I put together based on 2 chapters for this week in the text. So this PowerPoint focuses on finances. So let's talk about the budgeting process. And this is a little hard to see, but there are different ways to describe the budget. One could be a line item budget. So again, the line item budget allows for managerial oversight for expenses and income, but does not distinguish between them related to specific programs. A performance budget relates agency expenses to program units of service. A programming budgeting system requires dividing the total cost for the fiscal year by the number of outcomes to achieve a cost per outcome. A zero-based budget is based on the premise that annually every program and every item starts from zero. An incremental budget involves increasing or decreasing the various budget items by a small amount year to year. A support services budget involves expenditures required to administer agency services or to conduct fundraising activities for the entire organization. Capital budgeting requires fairly large one-time expenditure for items like major building repairs. And cash flow budgeting records the difference in the amount of actual cash coming into the organization and the amount of cash expended. This sounds very complicated, but it is one of the skills that all good managers need to learn about in terms of being able to read budgets, read financial statements, know the monies that are allocated to your particular program, and to monitor that spending accordingly. Budgeting is one of those skills that we can all learn. And even if you're not a person that is, one that really likes financial kinds of requirements, it is a skill that we all need to learn because finances are critical if we're going to provide services for our clients. And we need to have at least a basic understanding of how finances work. So understanding types of income and expenses. There are unrestricted funds, meaning that we get money and we could use it for any purpose that is deemed appropriate for the organization. We could use it for staffing, we could use it for research, and we can use it for client services. Donor restricted funding means that somebody has donated money, but they are telling us how they want it to be used. Contract grant funding is clearly restricted for specific purposes. Service or business contracts are the same. Income from services or business activities can involve fees charged for services rendered. Endowment income can be restricted or non-restricted. It's often restricted because it's to be used for certain expenses, often over a long period of time. Pledged income is often in an annual or a capital campaign, and that is money that people say they will give over time. Cash in kind matching funds can be connected to a challenge grant. For example, I will give you $25,000, but you have to match it with $25,000 of either cash or some kind of in-kind contribution. And accounts receivable are funds earned, but they're not yet received. So we billed for a service, but we don't have the money yet. Understanding types of income and expenses. There is cash accounting, means that transactions are recorded only when the cash is received and or only when cash is paid out. There is accrual accounting, which means that transactions are recorded when revenues are earned, so the cash may not be there yet. Fixed revenues based on a constant income, fixed expenses based on fixed expenses, indirect costs, shared costs, or costs that are indirect. Total indirect costs, a ratio of indirect costs to direct costs, and then there are salaries and wages, which are the biggest part of any budget generally. There are break-even points in the budgetary process of budgetary decisions related to one-time funding activities. Fund balance generally means the reserve, and if you are a 501c3, it also means that you have to file a form to the IRS called a 990. If you don't do that 3 years in a row, you could possibly lose your nonprofit status. Budgeting process in a nutshell. First, the organization has to have its objectives set. Then its budgeting policies and procedures set. Set the annual income and expense targets for the entire organization. And again, a budget is our best guess based on past experience of what we're going to spend and or receive in the upcoming year. It requires periodically, usually around every 6 months, that budget gets reviewed and revised to reflect either upward or downward how we are doing in income and expenses. Each unit establishes draft budgets that indicate priorities. We train the staff and board to read financial statements, very important. We give staff responsibility to develop budgets and the authority to carry those budgets out. They're based on risk and reward on successful accomplishment or failure. This is the manager that is deemed successful or not successful based on meeting or not meeting their budget. And there's a requirement for continued monitoring. Quickly, there's about 50 considerations when organizations have to reduce their costs. So first, there needs to be a cost-cutting team. We have to reward staff for coming up with cost-saving ideas. We postpone filling new or vacant positions. Can we contract out some of our services instead of having employees do them? eliminate positions where possible, use contract employees or consultants, cut staff to part-time, delay start of or expanding new programs, reduce services programs, delay salary increases, restructure the organization with emphasis on non-income producing positions, explore the idea of leasing rather than purchasing equipment, determine whether there are ways that departments can share resources, do services in-house versus contracting when possible, ask vendors if they provide discounts to nonprofit agencies. This gets overlooked a lot. Take advantage of economies of scale. Maybe you and another organization can band together to contract for some services and get a reduced rate. Give staff responsibility for site-based decision-making. Use zero-based budgeting to determine whether programs should continue based on their value and contribution to the mission. Seek donations, purchase items or services at the right time of year, change fiscal year from a calendar year to October to September, use volunteers, check with the criminal justice system because there are people who have to meet community service requirements, negotiate contracts to determine if there are hidden costs, review compliance with agency policies to avoid lawsuits, hire staff carefully, reduce staff turnover, invest cash in short-term investment instruments. Set up a system to track all equipment and building use, review current staff positions and decide assignments to determine whether all activities are essential, review personnel policies to reduce carryover of unused vacation or sick time, consider offering staff improved benefits versus increased salary, review how many people are filing for unemployment claims and see how you can avoid people quitting, convert fixed assets into variable costs, encourage employees to opt out of benefits if they can be claimed by someone else, ask for a rent reduction. Consolidate office space, negotiate free space for meetings, arrange to have an organizational supporter purchase equipment and then have it leased back to the organization through asset conversion. This is one I had not heard of before. Determine whether hotels will provide a discount, identify excess capacity or underutilized resources in the private sector, negotiate a lesser insurance fee for nonprofits, purchase board and directors insurance to reduce costs in the case of lawsuits, use email versus long distance phone calls or faxes. I'm not sure how many people fax anymore, and use discounted postal rates for bulk mailing. Examine potential local tax savings, periodically prune mailing lists, manage cash flow by collecting early, paying when bills are due, and earn interest, and consider using service agreements for maintenance and repair of equipment instead of paying for repairs. Just a few words about fundraising. The activity should fit within the organization's overall strategic plan and be related to its goals and objectives. First, we prepare a case statement, articulate a clear and compelling reason why people should consider making a contribution. Look at an internal case statement and an external case statement. If we're doing an annual campaign, we focus on those closest to the organization like the staff, board, past donors, consumer, and volunteers. We obtain the largest gifts early to set leadership for the campaign. We take advantage of enthusiastic volunteers to host small gatherings, often in their homes, to support the campaign. I was just involved in such an activity. Make personal contacts, call those with whom there is already a relationship, Explain the reason for the call and ask for a specific amount. Call after you do the mail campaign, make the case for the campaign, and provide for different giving levels. Steps continued, offer contributors the opportunity to designate their donations for specific purposes, like to purchase supplies for clients or to support programs. Annual letters should contain the following elements. They should be personalized, select a signer who's known to the donor, tell the reader how a gift will make a difference, ask the donor to consider upgrading their gift, give them a specific amount, provide an emotional reason to contribute, communicate the organization's track record, and provide a pre-addressed envelope. For consistent donors, figure out a way that they could be directly involved in your organization, acquire new contributors or recapture lapsed donors, get the name of people who attend special events, and provide an opportunity for memorial gifts. Okay. Steps continued. Use your website to include a return message link. Every email or letter can have a message inviting people to join the organization. Contact your vendors who you do business with, friends, neighbors, business associates of the board, and volunteers, families of those that the organization services if that does not violate confidentiality. Reply always immediately with a thank you note. Develop a good tracking system. Organize a campaign team that develops, implements, and evaluates the annual campaign. The annual fund can be organized in the form of a volunteer solicitation pyramid, with your campaign chair being the head of that pyramid, and select a well-respected and enthusiastic chairperson. Capital campaign versus annual campaign. We need to talk about pre-campaign feasibility. Does the organization have resources to proceed? The campaign should evoke an enthusiastic response. Personal relationship between the solicitor and donor is extremely important. The more involved and interested people are in the organization, the more significant their gift will be. Carefully select your chairperson. Must be built on the needs and benefits of the community. The finance goals should include all the costs. The goals should be realistic and based on past experience, and the plan should share the responsibility. And with that, those are several of the readings for this week, some of the information for this week. It's not all encompassing, so please make sure you look at the video and read all the chapters in the text for this week. If you have any questions about the material, please get to me as soon as possible. And remember, this is week 6, and this is your first week for a paper that is a narrative paper. Please read those instructions carefully. Hope you have a wonderful week, and I look forward to reading your assignments.